And we are live. Hello, everyone. I am HP Hollow / Edie Sky, and I write books. And today I am going to be talking about how I market those books. Reason why is that, especially in the past few years, every single time I go to a con, the conversation always comes up. How do you sell your stuff? Because you're doing an amazing job at it. And so I get asked so often that I figured I would just sit down, do a stream, go over all the things that I do, and everyone in attendance, if you have questions, you can ask them. I do have a little itinerary set up. So wherever you're watching, if you go into the show notes, you'll see what I have planned. And but still, feel free to ask whatever questions you want. But first off, I know I've got a lot of new viewers coming into this particular stream. And so I figured some of you were wondering, like, what qualifies you to actually run this stream? I have no idea who Edie Sky is or who HP Hollow is. So just for some context, when I have been publishing in some form for roughly 10 years. My husband and I started, husband was the first to publish, and he published The Dragons of Jupiter in 2014, but I was instrumental in doing the layout and the cover design and all the things that actually got it out into the world. And so my husband publishes, I publish as HP Hollow, and we self-published all of our stuff in the same way. And then my Edie Sky pen name came around, and that is the one that kind of put me on the map. As Edie Sky, I am an Amazon bestseller. My stuff basically lives on some of the Amazon sublists, and I have made it to, I want to say the highest one of my books has made it is maybe 895 in the entire Kindle store. So it's broken the top 1,000. So I'm not like a crazy household name bestseller, but it is an enviable position. And so in terms of my genre, I write as HP Hollow, I write fun fantasy adventure. As Edie Sky, I write fun fantasy adventure smut. And then my husband, in addition to his self-published stuff, he also is a best-selling, traditionally published author who has co-authored 5 books with David Weber, and who has one solo out with Bain and has another one coming out sometime later this year in October, I think. All that to say, I have experience with both the indie and the traditional side of publishing. And so all of my knowledge comes from 10 years of honestly doing a lot of trial and error and feeling my way through that until bestsellerness happened. And so let me open the chat here to see. All right, no one's in the chat yet, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. All right, so I do want to put forward some caveats at first. So caveat. I actually have no idea how to pronounce that. So sorry, guys. I'm one of the people who learns words through text and not through hearing them. So there will probably be some mispronunciations. Anyway, the advice that I'm going to give tonight is primarily for authors who want to make being an author a career. They want to be a career author or make a very intense hobby of it. And so are thus willing to treat it as a business. Now, that's not to say that new authors won't get anything from this. I've basically structured my itinerary so that I start with the easy stuff that applies to new authors, and then I move on to the more insane stuff later. And so basically authors on every level should be able to get something from this. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that there are as many different ways to market as there are genres and authors. So techniques that I absolutely swear by may not work for you at all. And the trick to finding out what does work for you is just lots and lots and lots of trial and error. Oh, hey, Melissa. I know, Melissa. This is already fun. But to say, one of the things you have to go into this knowing is that when you are marketing yourself as an author, you are going to fail 90% of the time. 90% of the things you try will not work. But when you identify the 10% that work for you, they're going to work hard. And those are the things you need to really push. But you do need to know that over your author journey, you're going to have lots of moments where you just want to quit. And you feel terrible, and you don't think you're cut out for it, but you got to push through, because writing is a long game. Generally, authors do not make money at writing until they have a sizable backlist. And for me, my sort of magic number, oh, hey, Dan, my sort of magic number was book I'm actually trying to do math in my head right now. Book 5, Titan Mage was the one that put me on the map, and that was my 5th book. And so I learned a lot before Titan Mage, and everything came together for that book to put me on the map. Now, another thing I want to point out, I write fun fantasy adventure, sometimes Gamelit, LitRPG, sometimes smut. So this advice is most valid for those genres. One of the things that I found over the course of my career is that each book genre has its own vibe, and the readers have their own expectations, their own behaviors, and we're talking right down to the way they spend things, or the way they spend money on things, or the way they're willing to spend money. Readers of some genres are a lot more willing to accept free books willy-nilly, whereas readers of other genres would really much rather just buy a complete series at full price straight out. And that's one thing that really kind of bewildered me when I began to learn about that. And one of the most important things I learned, though, is that you need to think about the genre that you're writing in and how those readers interact with that genre. Another thing to say is that my author journey has been weird as heck, and some elements of it have been very non-standard. My husband went from being indie published to traditionally published pretty much not instantly, but he didn't have an agent. He didn't take the usual route. What basically happened was we hung out with David Weber at a con, and David Weber liked us enough that we just started having a bunch of lunches together because he lives close to us. We became buddies with David Weber, and then one day David suggested, hey, you want to write a book with me? And that is the story of how we got into traditional publishing. Likewise, Titan Mage for me was, I obviously did a lot of things right because it became a bestseller that went really high in the Amazon Kindle store. But it surprised me when it happened. I was fully not expecting it to do as well as it did. And for a little bit, I was trying to reverse engineer what exactly I did to make that a successful book. And so we're going to talk about some of the things that I believe I have figured out that seem to still work because I've been repeating them on subsequent books and they've been working out really well. But all that to say, my author journey has been weird. And that is a thing to keep in mind when you start applying my advice to your author journey. So the first topic I want to talk about, and so I'm actually just going to go, here's the itinerary I'm going to go by for those who are watching and maybe want to drop out and come back to specific stuff. Topic 1 is going to be introvert marketing versus extrovert marketing, because it's a huge topic for authors, because a lot of writers are naturally introverts, but the reality of it is you have to be an extrovert to market your stuff in general. Topic number 2 is branding. This one is huge. It's made the biggest difference in my career, and it's something that you can start working on as soon as or even before you start writing. So we're going to talk a lot about branding. Let's see here. Let me turn my pages over. Topic 3 is going to be talking about newsletters, social media marketing, and ads, and that's going to be a huge one as well. Topic 4 is conventions and author networking. And speaking of which, I'm actually hosting a little panel later this week on Thursday at 8 o'clock, wherever you're watching, that's going to specifically talk more about networking amongst authors. There's a whole bunch of us. I think I've got 5 other authors that are going to be there. Melissa Olthoff, who's in the comments, is going to be there. Shami Stovall, whose name I probably just mispronounced, so sorry. And then Marissa Wolf and Casey Ezel, and there is one more, but it is completely slipped my mind. So anyway, just come Thursday and you'll figure out who it is. So topic 4, conventions and author networking. Topic 5 is things I'm glad I spent money on. And that is a really significant thing for authors who are working with a limited budget. Because one of the things I did over the course of my 10 years as an author, I spent a stupid amount of money on things I shouldn't have. And so I want to help you guys avoid that. And then finally, topic 6, things I wish I hadn't spent money on. So going back to the very beginning, introvert marketing versus extrovert marketing. This actually comes about because, contrary to popular belief, I am an extreme introvert. I fake extroversion really, really well, especially at cons. Okay, H.Y. Greger, thanks, Melissa. That's H.Y. Greger is the other one who's going to be on our panel on Thursday. So thank you. But I fake extroversion really well. And as a result of being an introvert who could fake extroversion very well, I ended up on a lot of networking for introverts panels. And there was one author at the end of one who said that basically it seems like the only advice we're getting from these panels is, if you're an introvert, is that you need to fake extroversion. And that is really hard for someone who is that much of an introvert. And so I just started thinking, like, there's got to be something better we can do to help introvert authors market themselves. And I had an aha moment that was also a real duh moment. One thing to realize, if you're an extrovert, it's going to be a lot easier to market your stuff. But if you are an introvert and dealing with people is just not your thing, it's not an easy button. But if you learn an ad platform, you can sell a crap ton of books without interacting with a single human being outside, say, Facebook comments and whatnot. And so my short advice is, if you're the type of writer who just fears interacting with readers, learn yourself an ad platform. And later I'm going to talk about what I do with ads, because I did a lot of trial and error with ads. And ads are daunting because they're expensive, and none of the ad platforms out there are intuitive. And let's see. Oh, Halfling and Spaceman are here. The Halfling is with you on faking being an extrovert. Are you serious? I would never have guessed introversion there. And also, guys, if you haven't listened to the Halfling and Spaceman, you need to. They're a super fun podcast, and I'm on them, like, not all the time, but I've been on a few times. I think they're awesome. So that's extrovert marketing. If you're an extrovert, you're good. If you're an introvert, learn some ads. Now, topic 2, branding. Branding is huge. Now, I actually need some water because I'm forgetting to breathe while I talk, so pardon me for a second. Okay. When I say branding, I mean the author persona you put out to the world and the way you represent your work. And that's basically all that readers see. That's what readers see of you and what you want them to perceive of you. Now, marketing as a whole becomes a lot easier when you have a defined brand that can be summed up in, say, a single tagline or a certain visual vibe. And it's one of the reasons why a piece of advice you'll see float around for authors is pick a genre and stick with it. One of the reasons why is, if you work in multiple genres, it becomes really hard to define yourself and really hard to find your core reader base. Now, that's not to say you can't write in multiple genres, because obviously some bestsellers have done it really well. But if you're just starting out, the easiest thing to do is pick your genre, pick your vibe, and stick with that until you have your audience, at which point you've got your audience. They'll follow you if you write something else that they like. Now, an example for Jacob and I, initially when we first started publishing, we did not really have a plan. We just, for the first several years, we were basically like, okay, we've got these books. They're just sitting here. Let's self-publish them and see what happens. We have the skill to do this. And so we put out, Jacob's first book was military sci-fi. And Jacob's second book was a young adult horror, sci-fi, fantasy, superpower kind of thing. It has some really tremendous fans, but it's incredibly hard to market because it's a combination of a bunch of things, and that's something else we can talk about later. The next series was a giant robot series, and then my first book, which we co-authored technically, was a steampunk young adult fantasy. And initially in our careers, those things were so disparate that it was really hard to, oh, hey, Richie, this is HP freaking hollow. Yes, it is indeed I. But because those things were so kind of disparate, it was hard to really identify what united them, like what people would enjoy about reading us specifically. And so we struggled for a few years trying to figure out how exactly to market ourselves. And then I discovered that I really like LitRPG and Gamelit. And so Monster Punk Horizon happens. And Monster Punk Horizon is very, like, I describe that as redonkulous fantasy adventure. And then Titan Mage was my next project after that. And it too was redonkulous fantasy adventure. And eventually, as the years went on, we began to realize that the thing that kind of connected all of our work was that it was all fun, and it all had some element of ridiculousness to it, whether crazy sci-fi details or humor or things like that. And so our unifying theme that we plaster on our website and everything is action-packed worlds with a dash of crazy. That's our identifying tagline. And so if you come to us, you know you're getting action, you know you're getting some kind of sci-fi fantasy something, and you know that it's going to be at least a little bit nuts. For us individually, I always, as I said earlier, describe my stuff as redonkulous fantasy adventure because I love writing really, really silly things. Whereas Jacob describes his stuff as explosive sci-fi with heart. And so those two things are just kind of how we identify ourselves. So whenever you're thinking about your branding, questions to ask yourself: how do I want readers to feel when they read my stuff? And what do I want readers to remember about me? Because the thing is, we're emotional people. We do most things emotionally, especially make purchases, and especially when we're purchasing entertainment. And so just excuse me, the comments are going crazy. So, Melissa says, great description. Thank you, Melissa. And Froeby says, a great escape from reality. Thank you so much. And Froeby's comment actually brings up a really good point about my own brands. That's what I want people to do. I want people to be able to take a break and escape from reality when they read my stuff. And it's actually one of the, I did not intend this whenever I first started writing. Whenever you're a new indie publisher, and you're self-publishing for the first time and you have no idea what you're doing, your goal is just to get anybody to read your work. You don't care who it is. You just want someone to read it. I know that feeling. And my audience evolved over the years. And one thing that has really, really affected the way I brand, especially within the past several years, is how readers communicate with me about the experiences they have when they read my books. I have had so many people say that they've contacted me and they've said, I was going through this rough thing. I was going through a divorce. I was going through the death of a friend. I was just going through some very bad depression. And your silly robot smut book helped me through it. And it's an amazing feeling to have as an author, knowing that even with this little bit of silliness, you've had that kind of tremendous effect on someone's life. And so that guides how I interact and these days how I write. Because my sort of sub way of describing my brand is I say, I want people to finish my books happier than they were when they started them. And my books have become a lot more thematically coherent since I made that decision. And let's see, there's so many comments going on, you guys. You guys are great. This is one of my highest attended streams, actually. And so Elizabeth says, that's a great tagline for your brands. Thank you, Elizabeth. And William Allen Webb says, I want to be you when I grow up. I'm far from grown up, but I appreciate that you think I am. Can't wait to revisit the Monster Punk world with some spice. Thank you, Richie. That's my latest book, by the way. It just released yesterday, and it is buried somewhere in this pile. But there we go. And then Dan says, nice one, William. It is a nice one. So, all right. So now, one thing to remember once you've identified your themes is that there is a really enormous visual component to branding. And one really important thing you need to think about is book covers. Because here's the thing. Book covers are often the first way most readers encounter your brand. And a well-designed on-genre book cover can communicate a huge amount of information in a short amount of time. It can also get attention in just the right way from the right audience. And one thing that I really like to do with my book covers, well, actually, let me back up a bit. So one of the most important things you need to do is make sure that your cover is on genre. And what I mean by on genre is that every literary genre sort of has its own kind of visual language. You look at this book, a well-designed book, and you know that you are picking up a naval military sci-fi. You pick up this book and you know you're picking up a romantasy. And what I do when I'm researching what kind of book cover I want to have, I go to the Amazon bestseller list that I want to land on. and I look at the book covers on the first several pages. And if you look long enough, you figure out that there are certain visual indicators that they all have in common. And what I do is I will usually either try to find an illustrator who can imitate that kind of work, or if I can find who illustrated those books, I'll just hire that illustrator. When I was coming up with the covers for Monster Punk Horizon and later Titan Mage, at the time, the Sky Realms series was one that kept catching my eye in the LitRPG sphere because its covers are just wonderful. And I just researched who did that cover, and it was Jackson Chota, who, by the way, is a wonderful artist to work with. So authors, if you're looking for someone to hire, do it. But I just contacted him, said, hey, what are your commission rates? And he has done, I want to say, 9 of my covers since. He's spectacular. But that's how you figure out what you want your cover to look like. And one thing is that, let's see, what if we put don't read this across the center from Dark Engine? All right. One point I want to make is that if your cover looks good, but doesn't communicate the genre, the book's going to have a hard time. And one book that I want to show you guys, it's actually it's my first cover for my own book. But I love it, and it communicates certain things well, but there are some things that it doesn't communicate well. And I'm going to share my screen here. So I'm going to show the original version first. What is happening here? All right. So this is the original cover of the Wizard's Way. Oh, wait. There, I actually need to press the button to put it up. So this is the original cover of the Wizard's Way. It's steampunk fantasy and very fun. The pug communicates that it's going to be something perhaps a little non-traditional. I'm actually going to bring up the new cover because I have learned how to do graphic design since I did that one. But let's see here. Stop sharing that screen and share this other screen here. I have learned how to do typography since our first covers, and I'm very proud of it. And if you want to learn how to do your own typography, YouTube is amazing. And so many windows. Okay. Allow and open. Okay. So The Wizard's Way is one of my favorite covers. The artist who did it was Mandy Dunkley, and she too is wonderful. Please go hire her. And it communicates steampunk. It communicates unusualness, but the one thing that it fails to communicate is the age range. Had a lot of people look at this book and think it's middle grade, when in fact it really pretty firmly aims in content for older young adult. And that's something that whenever I continue that series, I definitely intend to remedy. The art is fantastic. It's just not on genre. And that hurt its release initially. So let me get that out of the way. And I'll actually need to bring it back up because there is one point that I did want to make positive about it. So one thing I want to say about book covers in general, when you're considering your book cover art, consider this as well. Your book cover is not just your cover. It is a part of your brand, and it's art that you can repurpose on your website, on ads, on merchandise, on convention banners, and a good piece of art can go a long way. And I say that about the Wizard's Way in particular because whenever I go to cons, at least when I did con tables a lot, selling in dealers' rooms and whatnot, I had huge 9-foot banners with my cover art on them. And I sold at least 1/3 of the copies of The Wizard's Way because of this little pug in the lower corner. Because people would walk by my banner and initially they would look up and be like, okay, like dude with wings, that's interesting. Then they'd look down, walk past, then they'd always back up and look down again and be like, is that a pug with a sword? And instantly I had them. Sometimes I had to describe what the book was about, but Pug with a Sword sold it so well at cons. And which leads me to my point that when you're designing your cover, if you're commissioning a fully customizable cover, put a little something weird on it that makes people do a double take. And because that's going to really help you out when you're selling at conventions. And I do recommend selling at cons because that's been a huge part of my career. Now, another thing, let's see here. I've made notes. I'm very prepared for this particular stream, you guys. And all this to say, your cover art is the thing that makes you stand out from every other distraction around you. And one thing to keep in mind too, guys, we live in a platinum age of entertainment. And there's a lot of different things vying for readers' attentions, vying for their time. And you want to try to make yourself stand out as much as possible. And one way to do that is cover art. And for that reason, cover art is the thing I splurge on. Because the thing is, I intend to be an author. Like, I intend to go be in this for the long run. This art's going to follow me for the duration of my career. I tend to spend between, it varies by the individual artist commission rate, but I've spent anywhere from $400 to $1,200 on a cover. I buy more expensive covers now because I know how to market. That $1,200 cover paid for itself within 3 days on launch week. So that is something to consider too when you're paying or when you're commissioning covers. You do want to make sure that you can earn it back. And if you're a new author without a proven audience, you may want to try someone more inexpensive. But that does bring up the issue of AI, which is a giant topic right now. And so I do want to touch on it a bit. I personally don't use AI covers because, ethics of it aside, the legality of it is really uncertain right now. And it's the kind of thing where, you know what, I may use AI covers one day. If there is an option that allows the artist whose work is training it to be paid, all that kind of stuff. It's not certain right now. And I don't want to develop the identity of a book based upon art that I might lose the rights to or get sued for or whatever craziness might happen. But that said, there are authors who are using AI, and interestingly, in one of the genres that I write in, Titan Age, my biggest bestseller thus far, the harem adventure fantasy community. A lot of authors have been switching out their original covers with AI covers, and for whatever reason, the AI covers are doing better. And some of that could come down to the fact that their original art was perhaps not that good, but it's something that I think is worth studying from a marketing standpoint. And it's something that I have tried to make sense of too. Like, is it the composition? Is it just the style? What is it? I have not really identified what it is that makes AI covers work well in my particular genre, but it is an interesting trend. Another thing to think of in terms of AI covers, though, one of the reasons why several people in my genre have started leaning toward AI covers is that they've just had bad experiences with artists, you guys. Like, an artist is either uncommunicative, or when they finally get back to the author, the work is not what they asked for. And I can fully understand an author who has spent several $100s on a piece that is unusable, just going to an AI generator and being like, hey, this generator turned out something a lot better in 5 minutes. Why did I go through all this effort with this paid artist? And so that's another complicated side of the industry too. So I don't use it for book covers, but there are some really interesting uses for AI in marketing and especially in research and development that I do want to touch on as well, because I actually use a lot of AI art to determine what I'm going to write and also to determine what my covers are going to look like. In the harem genre, for example, it's one of the few genres where whenever you're describing your book, you don't really market the main character. The entire genre is basically about the hot girls that the main character runs into. So you market your book based on the girls. And so something I will do is, once I know loosely what kind of story I want to write, I will AI generate some girls that match the description of the girls I want to write. In the case of my most recent one, it was a bunch of monster girls. And so then I will run little Facebook ad click tests, which I will talk more about once we get to the ads part, and see, I have certain metrics that I follow, but then I look and see what pictures get the most interaction, what character expressions get the most interaction, things of that nature. And that helps me determine things like just what color is the character's clothing going to be on the final cover? What kind of atmosphere is going to be in the background of this drawing or of this illustration? What kind of clothing should she be wearing? A lot of that stuff comes down to to experiments that I did just visually. And occasionally, those of you who follow me will occasionally see my weird little ads when I'm running tests, and it'll say something like "not final art, just lazy AI art" in the corner. So I try to put some humor in it, because let's be real, people are sensitive about AI art right now. But it's one of those things too where AI art, the genie has been let out of the bottle, and AI in general is a genie that's out of the bottle. And it's the sort of thing where, in the same way that social media was the huge technological change that defined the past 20 years, I think AI is going to be the huge technological change that affects the next 20 years. And it's something that you need to learn how to use. And another way that I use AI in my marketing, so one of the things that I do when I come up with ads, or when I'm coming up with blurbs and whatnot, is I come up with little taglines for my books, taglines for my characters. Prior to figuring out AI, what I would do is I'd have my book of idioms and puns, and I would sit there for hours and try to come up with stuff that matched my book. That I would try to come up with fun puns that were unique to the book, that conveyed what I wanted to convey, and it would take hours for me. I go into Chat GPT, I put in the blurb for my book, and I say, "Hey, Chat GPT, give me a 10-word tagline that reads like an 80s action movie that is also snarky." And I get a ton of different answers. Some of them are not usable because, it's AI and it doesn't understand context. But after a while, I can pretty quickly get the number of answers, or I can have useful taglines in about 10 minutes. Work that would formerly take me hours to do. And so there are some really, really interesting ways to use AI when you're trying to figure out how to market your book. And so that's it for AI, though. Let's see what my next thing is. Let's see. Next on my list was how to design book covers, and I've already covered that. And so the next thing I want to talk about is personal visual branding. And this is actually something that I just kind of stumbled upon as I started going to conventions and whatnot. And one thing that I think all authors should do is have some kind of visual cue that readers can associate with you. I know there are several authors that I know where, like DJ Butler always has distinct hats. Michael J. Allen, I associate Michael J. Allen with vests so much that one year he showed up at a con outside his author persona, came to one of my panels, interacted with me, and I did not recognize him because I associate the vest so much with him. David Weber, whenever you see him, he's usually wearing an Honor Harrington series t-shirt. As for me, I did not intend this to happen, but my author photo has me in this bright purple jacket, bright purple shirt, and bright purple hair. And it was actually just a selfie that came out really well because my cat crawled up on my shoulder and curled up, and all of the color composition was just serendipitous. And I used that selfie as my author photo. So because of that author photo, purple is associated with me. I did not realize how much purple was associated with me until I changed my hair color at a convention, or I changed my hair color for 1 year. And at every convention I went to that year, the moment I set foot on con grounds, one of my readers saw me and did a double take and said, "Why is your hair not purple anymore?" And then later, I changed my hair back to purple, but it was a different shade of purple. And once again, readers looked at me and said, "Your hair's not the right purple. What's going on?" I went to Fantasy this year. And in fact, for the past 2 years, I've been there. And the hotel staff has remembered my purple hair. And even though I didn't intend that to be the thing that people associate with me, purple hair is now a part of my author brand, and I'm stuck with it forever. So I certainly don't mind the association, but it's been an enormously helpful part of branding. Same thing with my husband. If you ever see Jacob at a con, he always has his bow ties on, to the point where whenever he shows up without a bow tie, people have to do double takes because he doesn't look the same without his bow tie. And so just be aware of the visual aspect of author branding as well. All right. So now we're on to topic 3, and I don't think there have been any questions in the comments thus far, but if you guys do have any, please let me know. I will try to get to them in as much as I can. So topic 3, newsletters, social media marketing, and ads. Now, this is where you really want to pay attention if you are an introvert marketer, because this will sort of be your bread and butter. I'll start with newsletter, and this is going to be one of the topics where I've actually had the precise opposite experience of most authors who recommend this. Every single time you go onto an author forum, or you go to see what do you need to do when you're starting out as an author, everyone will say you need to have an author newsletter. The reason why everyone says this is because, yeah, you want to be on social media. Yeah, you want to be as visible as you can possibly be. But the thing about social media is that it's really fickle, and you could lose your audience, lose your page, lose any number of things at any moment. Whereas with your newsletter, you got those. You've got those email addresses, and for new authors in the audience, basically what I mean by newsletter is it's an email list that you draw. Most authors will draw people to join their mailing list by offering a free short story, free novel. I've heard different things suggested. We offer a free novel. Jacob's first book is now free because we have so many out. And so people sign up for our mailing list to get that free book. And then thereafter, they get all kinds of updates whenever we release new books and things like that. The biggest perk of having a newsletter is that those are email addresses that you have forever. And if any of your other sites suddenly go kaput, you still have those email addresses, and you can send a note or send an email out to your readers being like, hey guys, this happened. Here's where you can find me until this is finished up. That said, newsletters are my least favorite part of marketing, you guys. I feel like I don't do them well, but one of the reasons why they don't work for me actually has to do with a mistake that I made for the first half of my writing career. And it actually relates down to one of the points that I wanted to bring up in topic 6, which is whenever I started building my mailing list, I relied on freebie promo giveaways and paid mailing list builders. And what these basically are you sign up for these group promos, you give your book away free, and every author in the promo shares the link, and their audiences overlap, and you get a bunch of free downloads from a bunch of other authors' audiences. This sounds great in theory, but effectively, you're getting the people you get whenever you build your mailing list that way are not necessarily interested in your book specifically. They're interested in the fact that it's free. And I have similar problems with 99-cent giveaways, or not giveaways since they're buying, but I would build part of my mailing list by doing these little sales, and it ended up coming to bite me in the butt, because the thing is, there's actually a really good comment in the comments that I'll bring up and show in a second. The downside to building my mailing list via those promos rather than just letting readers come to me is because the readers who populated my mailing list at that time were people who were only interested in free books. And there's certainly something to be said for giving books away free as a sort of loss leader, but you can't build an author career on people who want books free all the time. You have to build your author career on people who are willing to pay for your books. And there were periods where I would release newsletters saying, hey, I've got a new book out. And I would, first of all, not sell a single book off of that newsletter, looking at my tracking links. And I would also get emails back from readers saying, well, I'm just going to wait till it's 99-cent. And it's just, you can't build a career on that. And so I do still have free books that I give away as my, as my motivation to get people to join my newsletters, but I don't join promos anymore because it attracts the wrong kind of readers. I prefer to get organic readers who are just going through, who just stumble upon my website or were specifically looking for my website and join my newsletter because they're interested in my writing, not because they're interested in a deal. And I did want to bring up, Rob Reed makes a really good comment. Make sure you've downloaded your mailing list contacts so you retain them if there is a problem with your newsletter subscription services, because yes, those can crap out on you too. And you don't want to lose all those email addresses that you've gathered over all the years. And so there we go. Now let's see here. What are we going to talk about next? Okay. Social media marketing. Social media marketing, in contrast to newsletter stuff, is my favorite thing to do. I love it, you guys, so much. And there's a stereotype that if you're an author, you need to be on all social media ever. I disagree. I think you need to, number one, you need to find the social media sites that you have fun on. And number two, you need to find the social media sites where your audience is present. And for Jacob's audience, primarily, it's people who are 30 and over, really into hard sci-fi and whatnot. That's an audience that primarily lurks on Facebook. Every single time I've tried to market his stuff on, say, TikTok, there's no interest whatsoever. There are not even a significant number of tags related to that kind of content on TikTok. And so I don't really bother marketing his stuff there. Similarly, I think of social media in a number of different ways. So Facebook, I tend to think of as where old people go to complain about Facebook. Twitter is where you go to start fights and get fired. TikTok is just unhinged. And there are two different sides of TikTok. There's the really worrisome side, and then there's the side that is unhinged in a really fun way. And then you have Instagram, which is, I have never really been able to, for my purposes, identify a core audience for Instagram. I do know that my audience is not on it, because every single time I've tried to post a book-related, say, contest on Instagram, I don't get all that much interaction at all. And contests are usually the things that I get the most interaction on everywhere. And there are several newer social media sites that are out now. I have not experimented with any of them because I like where I am right now. I've got a nice thing going on all the social media sites that I am on. And one of the points I wanted to come to is that one of the reasons why I don't like writing newsletters is because I don't like doing long form communication with readers. Like I find that a lot of my readers tend to respond well to really short stuff. And I don't want to spend 3 hours writing a newsletter when I'm going to get more interaction off of some goofy post that I make on Facebook. But there is an art to social media posting as well. One of the things that happens with social media is that regardless of what site you're on, you can have a ton of followers, but a lot of times your posts are not going to show to your followers unless you pay to boost your post. I do pay for certain things, but I also kind of get around that by posting a lot. And one thing that I will do, there are a number of things that I do to market my books on social media. Facebook is kind of my stomping ground, so I'm mostly going to focus on that. But I will say that one thing you want to do when you're planning your social media marketing strategy, figure out where people in your genre are and how they're interacting. One of the things for both the LitRPG and Harem, sorry, the comments are moving. I'm getting distracted. Dan says, I think Instagram has 100 times more authors than readers. Yeah, I think there's definitely something true to that. Authors and bookstagrammers who want authors to pay them to share their stuff. But with my particular genres, with LitRPG and Harem, there is a huge and active set of Facebook group communities, and same thing on Discord as well. And one thing that I have found is that I can go and post, hey, a pre-order is up, or hey, this thing, or I'm doing this new thing, and I can directly track sales and pre-orders to those posts, which is not something that has happened in some of my other, for some of the other genres I write in. And so it's important to be aware of how exactly your readers interact with social media. Another thing to think about in terms of how you interact with social media is, again, think about your brand. I write really light, fun stuff, very chaotic stuff. So I have a light, fun, chaotic internet presence, even on my personal page, because a lot of my readers will friend me personally on Facebook. And so it's like, yes, do I have serious thoughts? Yeah, lots of them. Do I ever post them? No, because it's not in line with the stuff that I'm trying to sell as an author. Let's see here. I had another thought that I wanted to bring up, but it completely slipped out of my brain. Let's see. I will drink water while I think. Yeah, it's not coming to me, so I'm just going to move on. Okay, ads, you guys. The single biggest difference in my author career was made by learning how to use ads. Now, I will say that there are some ad platforms some authors swear by that I have just not been able to get to work for me. Amazon ads is one of them. Like, there are a bunch of harem authors who make bank on Amazon ads. I don't know what about them doesn't work for me, but they just don't. But one thing I will say about ad platforms, you cannot go onto them and just doodle around and hope that you will get something right. Most of them are so complex that they present you with a bunch of data. You have to know how to read all of this really esoteric data to determine whether your ad is working or not. And it's very overwhelming. Every single author who has gone onto an ad platform and just doodled has failed. What you need to do is find a class that is taught by someone who knows how to run these ads. But that in itself has some caveats too, because a lot of these people running these classes, they make their money on the classes and they don't care if the authors they're serving actually succeed. They're just, because they're already making their money. One trick that I use to identify whether a class is worth taking is, number one, look up the person teaching the class. If they have a buttload of bestsellers under their name, chances are they know how to market their own books. That does become complicated when the person teaching the class is writing under a pen name, so you may not know if they have any bestsellers or not. But in that case, I then go look at a lot of them will post author testimonials. I look at who's leaving good reviews of those classes. If the people leaving good reviews are people who have a ton of sales, a ton of reviews on their own books, things like that, then it's probably a legit class. And so that's that. One thing, I'm not going to I'm not going to say the specific classes that didn't work for me, because obviously they're going to work for some people. But I will say that the one that has made all the difference for me is Steve Piper's Author Marketing Mastery Through Optimization. And it's one that I actually did not hear about until I heard about it from my friend Lydia Scherer. And if you know Lydia, she's the author of the Love, Lies, and Hocus Pocus Lily Singer Adventures. She makes bank. And when I was chatting with her, asking like, how do you make bank like that? And she immediately pointed me to this class. Now, this particular class, and by the way, the link to that class is in the show notes. So you can find it there or wherever you're listening. The thing about this particular class is that its ultimate goal is to get authors to set up a direct shop through Shopify. But there are two halves to this class. There is the direct sales half, which is the second half, and then there is what is called the click testing half. And this class, the first half of this class basically teaches you how to first design Facebook ads, and then how to run effective Facebook ads. And what it has you do is click test every single element of your Facebook ads. It has, and by click test, I mean you run little tests to see how people click, how people interact with certain elements of your ads. So you run a click test to determine the kind of image you use. You run a click test to determine your headline you use. You run a click test to determine your primary text. And once you have tested all those things, then you put all the winners together into a winner ad, and then that becomes the foundation of how you sell. And I have not gotten the direct sales part of the class to work for me yet because I haven't finished it, but I credit the click testing part of that class with the vast majority of Titan Mage's later success, because the first success of Titan Mage's first success largely had to do with me landing the Amazon algorithm just at the right time, because I didn't even, like, I just randomly chose a date. I think I just chose like, okay, LibertyCon starts this day, we're just going to release it that day. But it just so happened that there was not another competitor in my genre on that day, and there weren't any releases from competitors in subsequent weeks. And so it just kind of lived on the steampunk bestseller list for a while and just kept feeding into itself. And so that was magical. But I completely forgot what I was talking about. But anyway, so Facebook ads have been absolutely magical for me. Now, I'm not going to go into the numbers of how I do Facebook ads, at least in terms of specific numbers, because frankly, Facebook is always changing stuff up. And any number I give right now is going to be different probably next week. Who knows? In 6 months from now, definitely. So what I do but the basics of what I do. I will put together, once I've done all my click testing, I will put together several ads and they'll be in one ad set. And I set them all up and it's basically like, okay, fight it out. The best one that's the one that gets the best statistics. I look at click-through rate and I look at cost per click. And usually a strong ad will have a high click-through rate and a low cost per click, because both of those things indicate relevance to the audience that you're marketing to. Another thing that I'm really careful to do when I choose my Facebook audience, and one thing to keep in mind in general when you're talking about online marketing or thinking about online marketing, a lot of things that seem like common sense do not work in online marketing. In general marketing, it's generally thought, oh, you want to reach as many people as possible. In online marketing, you don't. You want to target, you want to reach not a wide number of people, you want to reach the right people. And so I will make really, really targeted audience lists. For example, with Titan Mage, it's obviously going to appeal to fans of giant robot stuff and harem. And I was able to make a pretty good productive audience based on those two elements alone. So that's the important thing to remember. Another important thing to remember is, and another reason why it's so important to test and experiment. Again, there are certain things that you think would work that don't. Every now and then on one of my ads, I'll get some kind of petulant reader who is like, this would be a much better ad if you would put the title in it. This would be a much better ad if you would tell me what it's about in it, put the blurb in it. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, you think that. But when I actually run my ads, the ads that have the title in them are the ones that sell the least. The ads that have the blurb in them are the ones that sell the least. And in general, for me, I will usually use the book's tagline or some short, pithy thing. And the short stuff and really iconic images are what get clicks. I also find that while cover art for me will get a significant number of clicks, especially the stuff for my Edie Sky stuff, the actual book cover does not get nearly as much interaction as just a plain old just a plain image that does not look like a book. And I do a wide variety of things with the images too. I don't always use the book art. Sometimes I will use a picture of a person. I will imagine my ideal reader and imagine where they are likely to be reading, in what circumstance, and then I will go onto a stock photo site. And one of the sites that I have listed in my things I'm glad I spent money on list is Deposit Photos. And it has a really good selection of just people reading. And then I'll put one of my taglines or something on front of that person reading. And that, especially if the person is smiling and looking like they're having a good time, those kinds of things get really good interaction. Another thing I will do, the ultimate thing you want to do with Facebook ads is somehow make your ads stand out from everything else on their screen. And so sometimes what I'll do is take my cover art and just up the saturation really high, like not until it looks unattractive, but until it has some kind of vaguely glaring color design, so your eye is automatically drawn to it. Another thing I will do, since people are so accustomed to images on Facebook, sometimes I'll just put some text on a background, and that'll get clicks. And I usually I let my ads run their lifetime. One thing that I will do is so there are two different services that Amazon offers that are easily confused but quite distinct. And so I want to say you have Amazon affiliate links and you have Amazon, oh my gosh, I forgot the actual word for it. Oh my gosh, what is it? Hold on, I need to check because it's Amazon attribution links. There we go. So Amazon affiliate links are links where you can put them, once you sign up for the program, you can put them on your website, and people who buy your books through those links, you get a little kickback from Amazon for it. You can also see, one of the big benefits of Amazon affiliate links is you can also see what else people are buying when they buy your books, which can provide you with some really interesting insights into what your audience is into. And but the downside of Amazon affiliate links is you can't use them in ads. Amazon attribution links, however, you access them through the Amazon ads dashboard. And these are links that you can generate where if you want to see specifically where certain purchases are coming from, you have your ad, you go to the Amazon affiliate or Amazon attribution page, generate a link, and the link you generate, you only use in that one ad. And when you have a bunch of those links set up and run an ad for a while, it can tell you where specifically your purchase is coming from. This is especially useful if you are a hybrid author trying to advertise your traditional books too. One thing I will say is that I spend a lot more time advertising my indie stuff than I do Jacob's traditional stuff. Because first of all, Baen Books, they do their own marketing, so they're pulling a lot of the weight there. But also with indie publishing, I handle all of my own stats. I can see sales come in live, and I just have a lot more control over the access to my data. Traditional publishing is by its nature a lot slower. The sales information comes to the publisher itself a lot slower than the data I have access to via my indie publishing, to the point where I could call up Baen and say, hey, I'm running this ad thing. I'm running this ad for this amount of time. Can you tell me if any sales differences have been reflected? And they would be able to tell me a little bit, but if the ad has resulted in a purchase from a bookstore somewhere, that bookstore they're going to give the data later. Amazon attribution links begin to kind of solve that problem, because if you're advertising your traditional book, you can use an Amazon affiliate or Amazon attribution. Whenever it's attribution, sorry, I keep getting them confused, you guys. Attribution is the one you want to use. But if you use an Amazon attribution link, you can then see that, yes, this ad directly resulted in this sale. Now, I will say sometimes Amazon is doing data testing all the time and is really good with its own data, but sometimes it is really slow to update your data. So if you don't see, sometimes it'll be 2 weeks before I see any meaningful stats on my attribution links. And so that's something you keep in mind as well. But it's a really, really useful tool that I've only just really started using. Let's see here. Anything else? Let's see. And Halfling and Spaceman says it doesn't cost anything but your time to come on the Halfling and Spaceman. And that actually brings me, I forgot to write it on my little post, but that actually, sorry, my brain just turned off again. Sorry, guys. I talk really fast and I forget to breathe sometimes. So I apologize for the awkward pauses. But another thing that you want to try to get on as an author is podcast. You will very rarely be able to trace sales back to podcasts. But the thing is, if Alex says your brain turn off, no. You'll very rarely be able to track sales directly back to podcasts. But here's the thing. If you're going to be a career author, you're going to be doing interviews. And podcasts are really, really good practice at interviews. They also, they're just fun. I really enjoy going on podcasts and hanging out with the people running them. And, Anthony, it's been a while since I've seen you. Anthony Wheeler's on the show. It says you're doing great. And that actually leads me into my next topic, which is conventions and author networking. There is a huge networking component that has contributed to my success. One of the reasons why I think Titan Mage succeeded the way it did was because I had more than previous novels. I had an enormous number of fellow authors who were interested in it because Titan Mage was a big departure for me. Prior to Titan Mage, I was writing these cute little sort of clean stories. Titan Mage is straight up smut, you guys. And when I mentioned that I had a romance name coming up, people were fascinated because it was such a big difference but from what I had written previously. And so there were a lot of shares. One thing that I actually did, which I haven't done this since, I told you that I scheduled Titan Mage's release for the first day of, I want to say, LibertyCon. I ran around LibertyCon wearing this sandwich board all over the place. I had Help Me Earn My Orange Tag on it, orange tag being the Amazon bestseller banner. And then I had a QR code that they could scan and just had people scanning my back all the time just to see what exactly this was, especially when I had the caution, it's spicy warning on it. And so that was one of the things where I got a ton of pre-orders just from walking around the con with that on my back. And I actually have to credit, I believe it was Terry Maggart for giving me that idea because it was brilliant and it made a huge difference. But yeah, author networking and conventions are primarily where I do a lot of my author networking. And the thing is, there are different types of conventions and they all serve different purposes. Alex says, yep, it was Liberty. I remember it well. There are different purposes. When you are just starting out, what you want to do is go to a local convention and get yourself an artist alley table and then just sell your book. And this is going to teach you a lot of really useful things. A lot of the language that I use in my ads comes directly from stuff I've said at cons, because here's the thing. When you're at a convention, in a dealer's room or in an artist's alley, everyone there is interesting. And you have to work to get people's attention. You also have to be short. Your world building may be absolutely detailed and fabulous, but no one who is just breezing through a dealer's room cares to hear a 5-minute description of your world. And some of this actually comes from, if I'm to think back to where I actually developed this strategy, it actually goes back to one random TikTok that I saw where an author was making this little silly video where she's really proud of all the world building she's done. She's really proud of the languages she's written. She's really proud of all these really detailed things that she's put into her novel. What are her readers really excited about? The elf smut. And it's the sort of thing where if you find like a single like iconic thing that your readers are interested in that you can just tell people about, like in a shorthand at a con, that's the thing that becomes your main marketing stuff. And let's see. Oh, Courtney actually makes a really good point here, which is that long descriptions can also keep non-buyers blocking your table. When you're at a con, generally you want buyers at your table. I will chatter with people at my table because I just like to chatter. And at this point, Jacob and I have been writing 10 years. We have a pretty solid core of readers in our local community that will come to see us at cons and come hang out. One benefit of these particular readers is that when they're hanging out at your table and new people come up, they will sell your book for you. They're amazing, and I love them. But generally at cons, if you keep someone at your table who just for a long time who's not really interested in buying, it's a waste of both of your times. Another thing is that short and sweet is often all it takes. With Titan Mage, I would talk about it's an isekai story. I would initially tell people about what's going on, what happens to the main character, giant robot stuff. But ultimately, the description that both won out at cons and won out when I did my click testing data, hot girls and giant robots. I tell people who are attracted by the cover that it's a book about hot girls and giant robots, and I'm sold. I very rarely have to tell them anything else about this book. And so it's like short and sweet. Another thing that I've done, and I have to credit Dave Schrader. I have forgotten how to pronounce his last name. We're going to say Dave Schrader right now. He has named these little things that I created lollipops. Because there came a point where when Jacob and I had 1 or 2 books out, it was really easy to just describe everything that was on the table. When we started having 5 or 6 books out, we needed something more of a shorthand. So I made these little things that they basically took how I would describe the books and put these short, pithy statements, and I would stick them in the books. So for one of the Gordian books, we have alternate realities and exploding universes. Sometimes I just do the genre, so thrilling sci-fi mystery for the Dyson file. One of Jacob's first books, Space Ninjas versus Space Marines, or worst sibling rivalry ever. And these are really handy just for allowing people to glance to see what the books are about. And if they're designed well, they too get information across really well. And let's see here. I've got for the Titan Mage ones, I have a big red one that says for mature or sufficiently immature readers only. So these are really, really useful at cons. Now, I will say I don't use them nearly as much anymore because we have so many books that we put on our table. With the lollipops in the books, it actually ended up making the table look cluttered. And we actually don't bring all of our books anymore because we found that there comes a certain point where the table gets so cluttered that people get overwhelmed when they look at it. And ironically, the cons where we've brought our whole stock, we've actually sold less, whereas the cons where we've had a more concentrated stock, where we're pushing specific series, we've sold better at those, even though we don't have all of our products. So that's the thing to keep in mind. But when you're new, you just want to get yourself a table and practice selling your book. But another thing that you want to do, there's a type of con that is, I've heard it termed a relaxicon. And these are cons where they're usually very small, and they usually have a lot of authors attend them and a lot of readers attend them, but there's usually a pretty 50-50 even mix. And they're not busy cons. They're cons where you can very easily just go hang out in the lobby and chatter with someone, and the pacing is not all that crazy at all. It's not a con like Dragon Con, which is another thing worth talking about. But the two that I have the most fun at, and also get the most work done at and networking done at, are LibertyCon and Fantasy for my genres. They're sci-fi and fantasy primarily. And Fantasy is actually skipping a year next year, next year, but we'll be back in 2026. But those two cons, the big thing about them, I go and hang out with all my author pals. And the thing about it is that, like, first off, they're authors. So you chatter with them about new projects and stuff. Some of these authors are also editors of anthologies. Who are looking for people to contribute to these anthologies. You can also just learn a lot from other authors, but the thing is, you also just get to hang out with other authors, and especially if these particular conventions have what are known as coffee clatches, which the way they're structured generally is the author guests come in, they just sit down at a table, and anyone who wants to come chatter can come chatter over the course of that hour or two. You basically get to speak to huge authors and learn what they do, learn what they're up to, and things like that. And you develop friendships with other authors. And that has been a huge thing for me. I have gotten to the point where when Jacob and I were first getting started, LibertyCon and Fantasy were just two fun cons we kind of went to sell our books occasionally and just generally meet other authors and readers. These days, when we go to Fantasy and LibertyCon, it's a business trip. And like Courtney says, LibertyCon feels like a family reunion these days. Both Fantasy and LibertyCon feel that way for me too. But the thing about Fantasy and LibertyCon, we don't sell books at them anymore because it's a lot more valuable for us to be on panels and to be interacting with readers. Because one of the things that really started, one of the things we really noticed about our sales began to really shoot up when people started thinking we were cool and just started thinking that we were fun to hang out with. We get invitations to cons because the people who run the cons know that we are going to be fun people to the guests and we're going to bring value to the con. And that's something to keep in mind in your author persona too. If you're a drama queen, you're not going to get invited to cons, at least as much as someone who is more predictably fun. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind with relaxicons. Let's see, Courtney says, because you are cool. Thank you. That actually brings up, I didn't actually have it in my itinerary, but that brings up another point with for marketing with me. One of the things that has really astonished me is that first of all, that people think we're cool because I think I'm just this little ball of anxiety. But one thing I started doing just out of the blue one year was running little video panels. And I started doing this back in 2020. There was a little show I ran called Authors Just Talk About. And its origin was it was 2020 and all the conventions were canceled. And I was really, really impatient and I wanted to be on a panel. And so I made my own. And so I was friends with a bunch of authors. And I was like, hey guys, you want to make our own show? You want to do our own panels? And that went on for a little bit. And then I started authors who had enjoyed being on Authors Just Talk About wanted to know if they could come on my show just to do promo. And so what resulted was the author Q&A series, which I also stream to Bane sometimes because I have a lot of Bane authors on it just because we hang out with a lot of Bane authors. And over the course of running those two shows, we began to figure out that people enjoyed these things. Like I just kind of did them because I thought they were fun and I didn't really think about, like I wasn't really prioritizing having an audience. I just kind of did them because it's like, oh, hey, I can help out my author friends. I like to talk about books. I like to be excited on camera. Let's do it. But they have actually ended up being one of the more popular parts of my marketing. And it's actually been really useful because one of the things that every few years, Jacob and I sit down and we discuss, okay, what on the marketing front is working, what on the marketing front is not working. We promptly get rid of the stuff that's not working. And so we can focus on the stuff that is working. And it occurred to us that, okay, people think we're cool at cons. That's a big deal. How do we bring that to our online marketing? And the way we've done it is by starting our new little, it's supposed to be monthly, but sometimes that doesn't happen. But it's just Jacob and HP talk about. And sometimes we talk about new book releases. Sometimes we talk about just random junk. But people come in and they enjoy just hanging out with us. To the point where I'm considering like what other streaming things can we do? Because one thing that we haven't done yet, but that we've had a lot of readers request is that we both of us like to play video games. We've had readers request that we just stream video games. And it took me the longest time to figure out the appeal of video game streaming, because whenever I watch streams or whenever Jacob is watching streams in the living room, I'm just like, how is this more exciting than just playing the game? Like, I don't get it. But then I realized that it's not the game that is the appeal of streaming. It is the illusion of hanging out with someone you think is cool, i.e. the streamer. And once I had that realization, that kind of made sense. And so I don't know if we're actually going to start streaming because we're already doing so much. But it was a cool realization to have. And it's the kind of thing where once I had that realization, I was like, this accomplishes the thing that other authors tell me my newsletter is supposed to accomplish. The newsletter isn't accomplishing it, but I'm going to shift my focus here. And just whenever we run one of these things, I'll just post about it in the newsletter. People don't really interact with the newsletter, but they absolutely will follow the link in the newsletter to watch the stream. And so it kind of serves that purpose as well. Let's see. And Courtney says, I keep thinking about doing a podcast that's basically a convention panel with friends and authors that I keep missing at conventions. Yeah, I mean, that's basically what Authors Just Talk About was. And it is a super fun thing to do. And it's the sort of thing too, where once you have a little audience, and it's the kind of thing where you don't even necessarily have to have a readership to do it. Because one of the things to think about before you even start writing, if you can build your audience before you even publish your book, you've already got people you can tell your book about. One of the things you can do, when Jacob and I first started out, we started out just with a website and blogging. And with the blog, we kind of went into this with the perspective of it's tempting to write about writing stuff, but you're new and you've only released one book. No one cares what you have to say about writing because you haven't proven yourself yet. And so what we did was we identified some hobbies that we thought would attract people to our website. So I wrote a bunch of movie and book reviews. Jacob would write about whatever he was doing in, I believe it was War Machine at the time, and his miniature war game strategies. And we began to develop a small audience based on that. We would get little boosts of book sales because someone on a Warhammer forum noticed the Warhammer similarities in the Dragons of Jupiter, and posted about it, and so we got a little boost from that kind of connection. So it's weird. One of the things, marketing for me ultimately comes down to synergy. I guess is what you could say. My most successful marketing has been things that interconnected or that could be multi-purposed. For videos, for example. So right now I'm recording something live. I haven't started doing this yet, but JR Handley has been getting onto me to actually upload my stuff to podcast sites so that people can listen to them via audio. And so this is later going to be repurposed as a podcast. I can also chop it up into little videos to then post on YouTube as shorts or on TikTok as little short form videos. So there's a lot that can be done with just a single piece of content. And that's a really important thing to consider in terms of efficiency. Because the thing, when you're an author marketer, you want to prioritize writing. Like if you want to be a career author, writing has to be your priority. But generally, regardless of whether you're an indie author or a traditional author, you're going to have to market yourself too. Your publisher is going to market you, but publishers have lots of authors that they're responsible for, and there is no one who is more invested in your success than you, no matter how much your publisher likes you. And so that's an important thing to consider. And let's see here. I'm losing my voice. Sorry. I've been talking a lot. Oh, dang. I've gone over an hour. So... but I still have things to say. But yeah, conventions are a big deal. And in terms of big conventions like DragonCon, when we first started out, a bunch of people said, go to DragonCon. You absolutely have to go to DragonCon. For those who are not on the East Coast, DragonCon is an enormous convention. We're talking 5 hotels, thousands of people. I can't remember how many were at it last year, but I know at one point it got up to like 60 to 80,000. It's nuts. When you go to DragonCon as an author, yeah, get on panels. But the most useful thing about DragonCon, in addition to panels, is also hanging out with other authors. Like I think correct me if I'm wrong, someone in the comments, but I think the Westin Bar is kind of the go-to place for authors to hang out. Networking gets done there. You don't want to try, it's my understanding that you don't want to try to get a table in the dealer's room when you're new, because first of all, it's crazy expensive. But also every single time I've gone into the DragonCon dealer's room, it's been packed and the line has been moving people along like sardines. You don't have time to talk to people about your book. And so I've never done DragonCon in that capacity for that reason. Now I have done, I think Jacob and I have gone for whenever Bain has signings at their little sub area of Missing Volumes booth. But DragonCon it's a really cool, like it's a good people watching con, but you want to focus on author networking if you go to a huge con like DragonCon, and it can be overwhelming. My preference for cons are small cons, like 1,000 people ish or less, because you actually get to interact with readers, and that's the fun part for me. And so I think we have reached the end of what I have to say about conventions and author networking. Okay, so topic 5, things I'm glad I spent money on. I've covered some of these already, and again, I don't think I've had any questions in the comments. But could you do a stream on how to be cool? I don't know why people think I am cool, and so no. But if anyone wants to clarify, then that would be amazing. But so things I'm glad I spent money on. I've already said book covers. Some others, I definitely recommend spending good money on book covers, especially if you've established, if you've had a few good little sales. You have to judge where you are in your author journey before you start shelling out money on book covers. The thing is too, and one important thing I actually forgot to say is that my genres they tend to lean toward heavily illustrated, really lavish sci-fi fantasy covers. That is not the case for all genres. If you write something like urban fantasy, you can go get a really decent urban fantasy cover for $150 from certain sites that they specialize in generating those kind of covers. Like, the cover does not have to be expensive, but it does come down to what genre you're writing in. And so just keep that in mind as well. Now, other things I'm glad I spent money on. One of the big ones for me is a piece of software called Publisher Rocket. And if you've ever heard of the company Kindlepreneur, you've heard of Publisher Rocket. What it is a piece of software that basically analyzes Amazon data. It can tell you, you can type in keywords and it'll tell you, amongst other things, it'll tell you how many people on Amazon are searching for that keyword, how many other authors are using that keyword in their advertising. You can also look up Amazon categories, and it'll tell you how many books you have to sell to reach spot 10 and then spot number 1, etc. in your to list on that bestseller list. It will also tell you in a certain area what keywords you need to have in your blurb so that people who like the category you're trying to sell in can find it. It's a search term thing. And before I release any book, I do a ton of research about the bestseller list, about the genre, about keywords in Publisher Rocket. And I try to choose keywords that have low competition but high relevance. And it takes some searching to find those, admittedly. But one of the reasons why it's so easy for me to write blurbs is, first off, 10 years of practice. But also what I'll do is I will make a list of the most important things I want to communicate about my book. And then I will take the list generated for the categories I'm trying to place in. And then I will try to fit as many of those keywords as naturally as I can into my blurb. You don't want to awkwardly keyword stuff, because that's just, it looks unprofessional and it's weird and it's just kind of but if you can fit them gracefully into your blurb, do that. And that's one of the things that I think really, really contributed to the success of Titan Mage. Titan Mage was, that was the first blurb I had that I was really proud of, because it worked and it flowed gracefully. And every blurb I've written for Edie Sky using the sort of template that I came up with for the Titan Mage blurb, they've all gone flawlessly. And Publisher Rocket has a lot to do with that success. Another thing that I'm really glad I spent money on, and this one has happened within the past few weeks, Vellum. If you are an indie author, I highly recommend, first off, owning as many of your assets as you possibly can, and also learning how to do as much of the production as you can. And here's why. So first off, for additional context, for our indie books, the only thing that I don't do myself is cover illustrations, because I just don't have the same kind of talent that Jackson Chota or Yanai or Mandy have. And so I do our typography, I do our internal layout, I do our ebook stuff. Someone else manages our website, but I come up with the content for it, and I'll get to that in a second. The reason why it's really useful to know how to do all these things, because you know what? At some point, even if your author career takes off, you're probably at some point going to hit a slow spot. You're going to want to make money, and you may not want to go back to a conventional job. But you know what? I have come to the realization, I've had a lot of people ask for my typography services. I've had a lot of people ask for ebook help. If I wanted to, I could very easily make a business out of knowing how to do those things, because there are plenty of authors who don't want to have to deal with those things. And it's the kind of thing where if your writing sales start faltering a bit, it's a really easy way to pick up a little bit of extra money by offering the talents that you've developed. I don't offer them. I don't offer any of the skills that I've developed as services, because I just have so much writing to do. But one of the reasons why I've taught myself to do everything is in anticipation of the day when I might have to do some of those things. But anyway, back to Vellum. In previous years, I used InDesign to lay out, Adobe InDesign to lay out my ebooks and my interior layouts. And it took me like a week to do it. And I had heard about Vellum, but I had already, I already had access to InDesign. I knew how to use it. And I was like, well, I don't want to learn a new thing. And then I was chatting with J.R. Handley about one of my goals this year is to just be more efficient in my writing in general. And he mentioned Vellum. And the thing that was keeping me from trying Vellum was that it was Mac only, and I have a Windows computer. He told me that there's a service known as Mac in Cloud where you can basically rent a Mac, and Vellum is pre-installed on it, and it's like $1 an hour to use it. And so, you know what, I was like, okay, I can risk $1. I can risk $1 an hour to mess with this and see if I like it. I told you before that it took me about a week to do layout. I logged on to Mac and Cloud and opened Vellum for my latest book, and in 5 hours, having never used it before, had completely laid out the book, and it's set up nicely so that you don't have the infinitesimal control that you have in InDesign, but you do get a really good looking product, and it's really easy to export whatever form that you want. You can export ebook, you can export print, and it auto formats it for you. I was so impressed by Vellum that I went out and bought a Mac because it's that good. And so it's amazing. I've basically gotten back, given that we're releasing at least 4 books this year, I've gotten back a month of writing time simply because I don't have to mess around in InDesign to do all those things anymore. And so Vellum's amazing. I love it. Please go buy it. Next for my website. Okay. Now, websites, if you're just starting out, there are a number of different options that are great. There's Wix, there's WordPress, and so this is a piece of advice more for authors who know they're in it for the long run. At some point, I wanted to have a website that was a little more sophisticated looking than a standard blog, and I had been really impressed by the work that I had seen Mod Farm Design do on several of my author pals' websites, and so I just contacted them, and they are the ones behind the current version of my website. And I highly recommend them. One of the biggest perks of Mod Farm Design, like the look of the website alone, aside, that is, there are a number of services that you can tag on to them. The one that really, really won me over, even though I was technically won over already by the rest of it, they have a newsletter provider, and it's infinite. Its price does not go up, regardless of how many people you have on your list. And if you are using sites like MailChimp or MailerLite, etc., for your newsletters, like the more people you get on your newsletter, the more expensive it's going to get, and eventually it's going to become prohibitively expensive. And when you consider that with newsletters, like it's a good open rate is loosely 20-30%, and you're effectively paying, like, there comes a certain point where you're effectively paying for 80% of people who don't interact with your newsletter. And so whenever I saw that the newsletter the price did not go up, I was like, heck yeah. And it's a really good newsletter interface too. So but yeah, I've really been pleased with Mod Farm. They're also really responsive. They're really quick to get my stuff up whenever I have questions, really fast about answering questions. And the websites they produce are just darn good looking. And so I highly recommend them. Another thing I'm glad I spent money on, and this is one for authors at all levels, BookFunnel. BookFunnel is a site that just hosts your ebooks and now your audiobooks. If you're ever giving away it's modfarmdesign.com, Rob, and it's in the show notes. So if you scroll to the event description or wherever you're watching, it'll be in there too. All the sites I've listed are going to be in the show notes. Hold it, I got to breathe again. Sorry, guys. But BookFunnel is a site that hosts your ebooks, and it also has the freebie promos on it that I'm not a huge fan of. Some genres can use them well, but I've just never had good luck with it. But I really do like their hosting service. You basically upload your ebook. You can make landing pages for it. You can use it you can link your newsletter freebie to it. You can create review copies to send for eARCs for reviewers. It's a really convenient little site, and it's not all that badly priced. And they also have an audiobook service now too. Excuse me. It's also really important if you want to create a direct shop, because you're going to be, even if you're on Shopify, you're going to be linking it somewhere else. And I linked mine to BookFunnel. All right. Let's see here. I had another question. Knowing I'm in it for the long haul, should I have a website up and running before my first contract publishes? It depends upon how you're going to use it. I think a website is a must-have for all authors, because it makes you look more professional, and it also gives you a place for you to. It makes you look more professional, and it creates a sort of online hub for you. I don't think it needs to be a complicated website, especially if you only have one book. You don't need a complicated presence when you're new. You just need a presence. And so as long as you've got like your book page, a little about you, maybe a little blog or links to your social media, I think you're fine. But I would definitely have at least a little something up. Let's see here. Next, oh, another thing. So I don't have this in the show notes. I subscribe to Adobe Creative Suite. It's primarily because I use Photoshop, I use InDesign. The individual the primary reason I subscribe to the entire thing is because it's like $30 a month to subscribe to Photoshop alone. For $50 a month, I get the whole shebang of Adobe things, and it's really handy. They have a huge variety of services they can use. Like I whenever I started looking into turning these videos into podcasts, I was like, I'm going to need audio editing software. Then I'm probably going to need to go buy some. Oh wait, Adobe Audition exists. I don't have to buy anything new because that's already in my subscription. Download. It was that simple. That is to say, though, you don't necessarily have to subscribe to that to be able to produce good marketing material. And for this, I say this mainly because Canva Pro exists. A lot of you have probably heard of Canva. I really underestimated Canva until I started taking marketing classes, and it's a powerful little site, you guys. So Canva basically allows you, it has little templates on it that you can use to create cute little graphics. And there's a free version, and the free version is useful. But the pro version has access to all sorts of little templates for all sorts of really, really useful things. For example, I was going to make a little graphic for, say, a book signing in Photoshop. And to start from the very beginning, it probably would have taken me 30 minutes to make this thing in Photoshop, just getting everything in perfect order. Canva has templates for that. Jacob and David have a book signing coming up next month that I needed to create a quick promo item for. I literally just like farted out a really good looking promo graphic in 30 seconds on Canva, and it's super useful. It's not all that expensive, and I want to say that Pro is like maybe $10 a month. You can also buy individual assets individually, but honestly, it pays for itself pretty quickly. They have a lot of stock photos that you can also access when you're making graphics, and so it can serve the purpose of, say, deposit photos, which I also recommend because, frankly, for some really specific things, deposit photos is better. But Canva also has a really, really good selection of stock photos. And if you're putting together your own stuff, like I use it to make book signing announcements. I use it to make sale announcements for my direct shop. I use it to make pretty versions of my con schedules whenever con schedules are released before those things. Let's see. And Rob Reed says, I have not used this site, but he says, I found Pixlr very useful. The free version is good and the paid version is inexpensive and adds features. So that's another one worth checking out, you guys. And Courtney says, on Canva, you can also create a team account so that more than one person can work on something. And that's a big useful thing too if you're working with, say, a small publishing company or a small group of authors. I do all my own stuff, so it's not relevant for me, but that is a really good perk. It can also customize things for specific social media sites and whatnot. It's a hugely useful thing. It's one of the best things I've subscribed to, and I really regret not taking it seriously sooner. A similar site, though, is BookBrush. And BookBrush is basically Canva, but specifically designed for authors. And the big appeal of BookBrush for me is it does a lot of Canva-like stuff, but it also has templates for 3D book displays. So you plug your book cover in, and it can generate what it looks like on an iPad for you, what it looks like in audiobook form, etc. And I pay for BookBrush just to use that. It's really good. Let's see. There's also, next on my list, I've already mentioned deposit photos. I've already mentioned author marketing mastery and optimization. One thing I will say about author marketing mastery and optimization, it is in general, it is a class for advanced authors. In order for the full version of the class to work for you, you ideally need at least 4 or 5 books, preferably in the same series. So you've got to be somewhat along in your author career. And also, it's an intense class, and it can be an expensive class beyond the initial payment. Now, the initial payment is entirely worth it, but you're also going to be spending money running your Facebook ad tests. There's a number of, once you reach the direct sales part especially, there's going to be all sorts of other pieces of software and other services that you have to subscribe to. So once you get to that part, it's intense and you need the time to be able to invest in it. So it's definitely next level, but it's also been a career maker for me. So I highly recommend it. Another site that I really recommend is later.com. It's and there are similar sites too. I don't necessarily recommend this one over others. It's just the one that I use. Later.com is a social media scheduling site. I can set up a post, select where I want it to go, and it'll post to 3 different places at once, and saves me so much time, and also keeps me from having to get on Twitter every day, which I love. Like, I have a Twitter presence because Bane told me I needed to have a Twitter presence, but I hate Twitter. And so it's so depressing. And so I get on Twitter about once a month, but it looks like I'm on it all the time because I can schedule posts from Later. And so I love later.com so much. I primarily post to, I want to say, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or X now, I suppose. But there are several other sites that it can that it can post to. There is a free version. I use the paid version because it allows you access. You can basically post to multiple accounts on the same on the same social media site, which, since I run 2 different accounts, one for Hollow Writing, one for Edie Sky, it's really helpful for me. But I definitely recommend that one. Also, if you are the kind of person who wants to start your own little video like this, or podcast or whatever, Restream is the service I'm using for this. I have also used StreamYard. I recommend them both. The primary difference for me is the primary reason why I choose Restream over StreamYard is because Restream allows me to stream to multiple channels on the same site in a similar way that the paid version of Later does. So this is streaming, for example, to both my Hollow Writing page and my Edie Sky page. Since I sometimes do interviews of Bane authors, they allow me to stream to their page sometimes too. And so I've got 3 different accounts that I stream to on all these things. But if you're just streaming to if you're just streaming to one account on each service, StreamYard is fine. They're both great. And that brings us on to our final topic, which some of this I've already touched on. Topic 6, things I wish I hadn't spent money on. One is mailing list builders. And the primary reason, like I said before, is that it basically ends up building you a list of people who don't want to buy books full price. And there is something to be said. Like, there are some authors who have found real success using freebies as a loss leader. It's usually authors that have that have readerships in really voracious genres. For example, like romance, for example, has readers that will just devour everything. And so it's my understanding that freebies work really well there. But it's the kind of thing where you have to approach it cautiously. I have never had luck with it. And so there's that. Another thing that I'll add is 99-cent promos. That's another thing that some authors have found a lot of success with. But one thing to keep in mind when you run a 99-cent promo, much like with people who are downloading books free, they're not necessarily interested in your book. They're interested in the fact that the book is 99 cents. And one thing that I have found over the course of marketing is that excuse me, my voice is going, you guys. Of course, it's almost 10 o'clock anyway. But if you sell a book at full price, you have better read through. You have readers who are more likely to finish a series that they buy at full price. And yeah, Courtney makes actually the point I was about to get to. You're training your readers how to pay for your books. Loss leaders are okay, but training people to buy them full price is ultimately better in the long run, and that's exactly what you want to do. And there is a slight difference between readers who get free and 99-cent books and readers who buy full price. And these examples are on 2 opposite ends of the spectrum, 2 extreme ends of the spectrum. Occasionally, when I run freebie promos, I will get a handful of emails that are basically really antagonistic, that are like, I gave you my email address and my ebook didn't show up, so how are you going to make this right? And in the back of my head, I'm like, ma'am, you have lost nothing. Why are you being so aggressive? And then, I put on my Southern lady, like, customer service voice and respond properly. But for whatever reason, like free and 99-cent buyers sometimes act really entitled to the thing that they're buying. Contrast this to, I literally received a message from a reader yesterday who bought my latest book, which I released at full price, and didn't enjoy it, but then emailed me to apologize for the fact that he didn't enjoy it. It's completely opposite. And but it's what you're ultimately doing when you price your books. You are telling readers what kind of value to expect from your books. The lower you price your books, the lower readers are going to value your books. And that's what it comes down to. You want people to buy your books who are going to enjoy your books, who are going to see the value in your books. When it comes down to actually how you determine how to price your books, what I do is look at, much like with book covers, what I do is look at how other authors in my genre on my bestseller list are pricing their books, and then just kind of go with whatever the most common one is. For whatever reason, some readers in some genres are willing to pay higher prices for books, where readers in other genres would rather pay certain lower prices. And sometimes I've raised my prices and not noticed a single difference in sales. And so that's something worth experimenting with too, especially if you're looking into doing this as a career. So, all right. So fortunately, there are not a whole lot of things I wish I hadn't spent money on. There's just some things where I spent a lot of money on them and I shouldn't have. But that is actually, we have reached the end of my little itinerary. So thank you everyone for hanging out with me for an hour and 40 minutes. And Courtney says here, I've raised my prices and watched sales go up. Yeah. I mean, that happens in some genres. It's really wild. And I guess it brings me to one of the ultimate points I want you to take away from this. Every author's experience is going to be different. Every author's writing experience is going to be different. Every author's marketing experience is going to be different. And like I've said before, some of these things that I absolutely swear by may not work for you at all, either because you're not writing in the same genre or because you just have a different audience. And so the important thing is just to remember to test as much as you can, but also be willing to fail. And try not to get depressed when you fail, because the thing is, you're going to fail a lot. That's part of figuring out what works. But ultimately the thing is, when you're an author, you only need to find that solid 10% that works. And then once you have found what works for you, that's it. That's the thing that makes your career. But you do have to do a lot of experimentation to try to figure out what works. And so I know that sometimes it is really easy to get down when you're marketing your own stuff, and it's not working for you. But eventually you get there. Sometimes you just have to put your head down and push through it and try things. But what I really recommend doing, the thing that has made my career, is testing things to infinitesimal detail. Whenever I have something that works, sometimes I definitely want to try to refine it. I only change one thing at a time. And that helps me identify what specifically is working or isn't working in that particular thing. And so it's just, you got to pay very close attention to what you're doing. And it's with stuff like social media too, pay attention to what time of day you're posting and how how interactions change. A lot of social media sites allow you they allow you access to that kind of data. If you look on, one of the most useful things about Facebook ads actually is, in addition to selling your book, people like your page. Once a certain number of people like your page, you then get access to demographic data about the ages and other information of people who are enjoying your books, which then allows you to then further refine your audience. And that's really useful. There's a lot of information to juggle, but eventually you figure out what the proper information is, and your career starts to come together. So yeah, that's all I have to say. So again, thank you guys for sitting all this time and listening to me. If you want to hear more about author networking specifically, the girls and I are going to be talking about that on Thursday at 8. If you are watching this anywhere, it'll be on whatever site you're watching it on. So I hope you join us for that too. But otherwise, that's it. Thanks for joining me. Bye.